Giovanni Papini 2. God's first sin, the creation. God spoke. My first sin is that I caused the world to be born. You will probably be astonished that I accuse myself of such a crime. There has been more than one among you who has cursed me for the creation as a crime. But most men have glorified this creation as a proof of my profound wisdom. But if some of you have seen and lamented the evil in it, there are many theologians ready to justify me. Your priests have taught you to consider the world as a gift, generously donated by me to beings without rights. For every breath of air, for every ray of sunlight, for every blade of grass, you should thank me on your knees. You who are even unworthy of having been born to suffer. My opinion is opposite to that of those who pretend to speak in my name. To me, this world is the fruit of my sin, of a weakness that has no consolation. Perhaps you may be able in some way to understand in what sense creation may be a sin. Look at the saints. The holiest saint is not he who has felt himself drawn towards virtue, sacrifice, and abnegation from the earliest years of his life. There is no merit whatsoever in being spontaneously good, sweet, patient, and loving. Such men know no evil, neither could they do evil. And if they did evil, it would be torture for them to do so. Where is the merit in that? Where is the struggle, the victory? Saintliness is a conquest, and it begins with repentance. And the greater the repentance, the greater the saintliness. Only he who has reached with his foot down to the deepest filth of evil may rise and fly to the highest seat in heaven. And which is the greatest repentance? That which follows the greatest sin. The greatest saint was he who had been the greatest sinner. Therefore, if God is the saint of all saints, he must also have sinned more than anyone else. He must have been the worst sinner. And what is his supreme sin? It is his creation. The act of creating is a debasing process. It is a step from the perfect to the imperfect, from the idea to the gross reality, from spirit to matter, from the perfection of non-existence to the depravity of the existent. Reality is a fall from thought, a materialization of a dream, a deformation of the idea. The ideal is the non-real, the non-created. Creation is an imperfection. Creation is my sin, my fall. How could I have sent the fire-armed cherubim against Adam and Eve when I had committed a much greater sin than this. I should not have punished as guilty the very first victims of my own fault. But if I have sinned, I have also had my punishment. And what punishment can be greater than to have to contemplate forever my creation and to see the most hidden sorrows, the most agonizing perversities, and the most loathsome miseries? If the fault was exceedingly great, no less tremendous is the punishment, and it never ends. Consider now what has been my torment, the unremitting remorse for my fall. Who will save me? Perhaps you. I did not come to redeem you, but it is I who need to be redeemed by you. In order to free me, it is necessary that the world should come to an end and disappear. But the world, according to my laws, cannot be suppressed until it reaches the greatest perfection. But perfection is the beginning of the end. If you wish to save me, you know now the way. Whosoever among you loves me will wish for nothing but the end. Urge the world on to its perfection, and when it shall have sunk again into that nothing from which I should never have brought it forth, I shall be free from remorse, purified from sin, and delivered from my punishment. Not only has God not redeemed mankind, but God expects to be redeemed by mankind. What induced me to create? Knowing everything about the future, knowing that to create was a crime, and that creation was a punishment, why did I not resist that temptation? Why did I seek my own and everybody's misfortune? This is one of the most disgraceful incidents in my history, and the most difficult one to explain. I, the unmanifested one, wished to manifest myself. I, the pure one, wish to bring forth impurity. I, the perfect one, lowered myself. For what recompense? With what hope? The confession is painful, but necessary. The reasons for my fall are two: pride and boredom. You know better than I how many evils spring from these two sins. I had existed since eternity, gathered within myself. My solitude was frightful, and turned still more oppressive by the concentrated poverty of my being. You may picture me at that time as a fire without flames or heat, as a mirror without images, as a sea without shores or storms. My strength was latent. My greatness was invisible. There was then born in me the determination to manifest myself, to reflect myself in my work, to create beings such that they would give me at least the appearance of being known. understood. But where could I set to work? Not towards a greater perfection, for I was already the most perfect one. Any move of mine could mean but lower myself. The creatures were bound to be poor imitations of the Creator, and the creation is a coarsening of the creating tree. It pleased me, I repeated with terror, to try my power with a deed that would render visible the invisible, tangible the intangible. I wished to measure the range of my power, to give shape to my imaginings, the multicolored stuff of changing reality. I wished to create for myself an army of slaves, a multitude of believers. I wish to create a spectacle to cheer my eyes and to amuse my mind. No one can guess the intense thrill of happiness of the creating instant. I have paid for those moments of pleasure with thousands of years of grief, and yet I cannot forget them. I was so lonely, so horrible, lonely. My life was even, monotonous, without changes, without surprises, placid as a stream of a river that flows in the darkness, not a sound, not a ray of light, not a movement. My place was such that it resembled the peacefulness of death. And then my mind was moved by pride. And no sooner had I thought of a possible world than the stars lit up in the heavens, the bodies rode in space, and on the earth was born, together with the first life, the first sorrow. But I have not sinned once only. And your little solar world is not the first that has sprang from my mind. A universe that you are not able to measure is but a handful of dust in a corner of the finite. In other parts of space I cast other worlds, other suns and planets of which you know nothing. I have shaped all my dreams in solid mountains and living beings for my amusement, to satisfy my pride. The beginning of each experiment was a joy for me. The miraculous appearance of the worlds gave me a thrill of pleasure, and my mind so lowered itself as to be filled with astonishment. The week of Genesis was a holiday. It was like an intoxication of my solitary and silent soul. In those moments I would speak, and my words became stars and mountains of stone. It was only when the new universe was spread before me and had begun to develop and live on its own accord that I saw its imperfections. The experiment had not been successful. That which had been left to the creature, that drop of freedom, the vast sea of law, spoiled everything. What one does is always inferior to what one conceives. God himself is not omnipotent, so that matter shall have the same beauty as the tree, and that existent and perishable shall be as fully perfect as the non-existent and eternity. Your world was not the best fashioned of all possible worlds. I recognized and suffered all the misery of your life. Your sorrows were mine. Your cries and your sobs resounded in my own heart. And every innocent tear pierced me like a fiery sword. No suffering was hidden from me, and every suffering was agony for me. An instant of your pain was turned into a century of remorse for me. The feeble crying of a baby shocked my whole being and hurt me like an infinite torture. At every moment of the day and the night there rose to my throne the half-suppressed sobs and the thundering curses of all the afflicted ones. Does it surprise you that your God should be so sensitive and so uselessly merciful? You may say, if you yourself created us, did you not know that misfortune would be our lot and evil our destiny? If you could not make us differently, why did you cause us to be born? If you are so moved by our fate, why not destroy us? Why not make us better or return us to the abyss whence we came forth at your command? Terrible questions. But even I may hope to close your mouths forever. It is a fact that I am the original cause of the whole creation, and therefore every evil in the world must be attributed to me. Others said that evil does not exist, that it is merely a delusion, and that what on earth seems an injustice is in heaven really justice. That the suffering of one day becomes, with time, eternal bliss. In the sight of God there's nothing but good, and earthly evil is nothing but good misunderstood. But that is a play of words. The present evil is not annihilated by the future good. And sorrow is felt by man as sorrow, even if someone teaches him to call it by another name. The evil in the world may be alleviated to a certain extent, but nevertheless it does not become a nothing. There was a man, Buddha, who said that the misfortunes of the man of today are but punishment for the sins committed long ago in other existences by the same soul, which would justify what now seems to be injustice. But why did they sin the first time? What faults had they committed before they began to exist? Could I not have made those souls incapable of sinning, and so have done away with all pretext for punishment? The truth is that I, myself, deliberately willed evil. That evil which depends upon your own will, as some theologians teach you, is not the only one. And this invention of the free will was another trick in my favor devised to save my responsibility. First of all, I could have made you naturally good, so that if left absolutely free, you would have felt no inclination to sin. But sins are not the only evil in the world. The sadness of the shortness of life, and the inevitableness of death, the devastations and death caused by hurricanes and volcanoes, plagues and earthquakes, all the evils that do not depend upon you, demonstrate that evil is not a consequence of sin. I alone willed your evil. I created you in such a way that evil should spring in you like water from the mountains. The world that you inhabit is the world of suffering. It is a place that I created purposely to experiment with the forms and effects of suffering. You are created purposely to be my victims unto the last day. My life, as I told you, was too even and calm and happy, without motion and without change. I knew sorrow, for I am content to know all, but I had never experienced it. I then wished to create a world where sorrow should be the law, where all the beings should be content to strive and to be discontent, and all the more harshly the better. I wished to see in what way the suffering beings would manage to free themselves from sorrow, which is why I gave them a certain amount of freedom, and I desire to observe the advantages in the world, content to lamentation and misfortune. In all my creation, as I've said, there was evil, because what is created cannot be as perfect as the thought. In this way, I not only added a new spectacle to the numerous perverse manifestations of my pure being, but at the same time, I managed to taste, in the only way open to me, the fruit of sorrow. Your sorrow becomes my own sorrow.